Hello, I'm happy to be with you today. We are starting on Unit 3, Introduction to Sustainable Business and Innovation. And I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about your semester-long company sustainability paper, and then launch into a discussion about how sustainability can actually create value in a business, which at the end of the day, if you're trying to sell the idea, or expand sustainability within an organization where you have people that are maybe a little reticent, you're not going to be able to do it unless you have a really concrete, succinct business plan and purpose for them to embrace that new paradigm. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's flip over and just take a quick look at our Moodle shell first. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that as we enter Unit 3, just like any other unit, you're going to see all your tasks and the outcomes and all the different resources, etc. But also, I say here in this week, note there's a special section called Company Sustainability Paper, etc., that requires you to select a company. And so basically what it does is it tells you to come over to this other unit as well. So this is an all semester project. You'll come into here. You'll see also, a little introduction to what it is. And, oh, that's not supposed to be there. An introduction to what it is, instructions to the paper itself. And then in the instructions, there's a couple little follow-ups that you do before you launch into the actual project. One is just to submit the name of the company, and one is to submit an outline. And then the final paper is your final in this class, and that's due the Sunday before finals week. So all of the instructions are in here on how you choose the company, what the outline is, and the project itself. Okay, so value creation through the triple bottom line. So the triple bottom line, as you well know, is this idea of people, planet, profit, and how we're using those metrics to measure the success of our business. So this is not a new concept. John Elkington coined this term in I think the early 80s. And some folks jumped on the bandwagon immediately. They saw the potential prosperity in it. They saw that the future of business development and growth had to be built around natural capital parameters. There's only so many resources. The social inequity is increasing, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always been folks that have been what we call embracers, the early visionaries, Yvon Chouinard with Patagonia and Cliff Bar and the founders of Ben & Jerry's. And, they see it as they saw it early on as a competitive advantage and made it a really holistic part of their business plan. Whereas a cautious adopter, which is what we're really going to be talking about today, the reticent board or the manager that's not quite sure, or the small business owner in a conservative rural area, maybe that thinks it's kind of hippie or whatever. We need to be able to talk to them very concretely about how they're going to save money or expand markets or become more competitive by embracing this idea of sustainability. Big publicly traded companies, this is the Director of Global Sustainability at P&G, Procter & Gamble. I haven't been asked to make the business case for sustainability for years. From our point of view, it's proven. Now let's just get on with it. So, when you walk into a business and you see that, it's like, phew, this is great, but that is not, does not definitely describe everybody. So this is a really early book about the advantage of embracing sustainability by a guy named Bob Willard, who I heard speak probably 16 years ago now. And he talks about a 6-pronged business case. We're going to go into each of these items in depth. So right now I'm just going to present you with the overall case, but this is going to be the basis for your company paper. To find a company that's using one or more of these facets of the business case for sustainability and talk about how it's making the business more robust or successful, or how it's presenting challenges. So here's the business case for sustainability. And if there's nothing else you take away from this course, I hope it's this. The first facet is to enhance revenue through competitive advantage. So how do I make my product or service different from everybody else's? I'm a carpet cleaner, okay? And when the carpet cleaner comes and they leave, your house smells it's got that medicinal smell and that kind of toxic chemical smell. Well, I'm a green carpet cleaner. Or when your pet comes to be boarded at my kennel, everything's organic, all natural products. She's not going to have, itchy skin or eyes, or, she's not going to have any toxic products around her. How do I market myself to take advantage of the fact that I'm different along the lines of green or sustainable or more equitable products? I source ethical raw materials, things like that. So enhancing revenue through increasing customer demand, I might add, around the requesting green products, sustainable products. And those look really different for everybody. For some folks that might mean local, for some folks that might mean toxin free, for some folks that might mean produced with green energy, or no disposable containers. I mean, there's lots of different elements that describe it, but just as a very general comment, customer demand is definitely increasing. I don't know if you saw, but the other day, Ford just announced 2 electric vehicle plants in Tennessee and Kentucky dedicated solely to Ford F-150 electric vehicle trucks. And that's because there's customer demand around it. Secondly, I'm going to cut operating costs. And V1, version 1, version 2, V1 is sort of the entry level, V2 is when you get more sophisticated. But I mean, when you're talking to somebody about why sustainability is good for their business, you have to focus on, if you use less water or less energy, or you produce less waste, you will save money. Using less resources always saves the business money. So it's about just coming into somebody's business and saying, if I retrofit your lighting system in here is really old, and if we upgraded that, you're going to save 30% energy efficiency immediately in your warehouse or on your production line. And that's going to be coming back to you on your electric bill every month. I can guarantee you, if you can put it on paper and prove it to them, they don't care if you call it green or sustainable, they're going to do it. So this is a really great entry point for people that may not be value congruent with the idea of sustainability. And then this sort of the second tier of this, many organizations, this is how, that should say water, waste, energy. This whole group is called eco-efficiencies, becoming more ecologically efficient. And this isn't a new concept, obviously. Excuse me. But the next, so companies that embrace this just as an ethos and they incorporate in all aspects of their, headquarters, their operations, their research and development will immediately see savings from this. Well, the next level of this is V2, product design, which is rather than get to the point where I've got a system or a product that produces waste, let's design it so that none of those things exist. Let's design it so that I use much less water in the finishing process, or that my solvents are toxin free, or that when I'm done using this product, it's very easy to upcycle to something else so there's no waste at the end of it. This product design, these concepts are more sophisticated for sure. They occur way earlier in the process. So they're when you're doing your research and development or you're in your lab. And there's a number of frameworks, but the 2 that I'm most familiar with, cradle to cradle, which means I take the raw materials, I develop them, I turn them into final products, I get them to the customer. And at the end of the life of the product, it doesn't go to the grave, i.e. the dump. It is recycled or upcycled. And any materials that are compostable are easily taken away from the product so that that can be, that's biodegradable. So office furniture, where at the end of its life, you can remove the textile from the frame, and that's biodegradable. And then the frame itself can be upcycled easily to something else. These concepts, cradle to cradle biomimicry, we'll talk about in the third chapter or the third week of this unit. So those first two are the easiest for people to understand. Small businesses get this, multinational businesses get this. They're much more widely applicable. This third one is more pertinent to a large organization. And it's talking about the increasing interest in SRI. SRI stands for socially responsible investing. And socially responsible investing, actually that number is a little bit old. I think it's, that must be a couple of years old. It's quite a bit larger than that now. What this refers to is people that are investing in the stock market, whether, it's me with my teacher's salary, putting in my, $300 a month or whatever, or it's some huge, huge public employee retirement system, like the whole California system's got, $70 billion in the stock market. So whether it's me or California PERS, when we go to invest in the stock market, we're now demanding mutual funds and companies that are socially responsible. I don't want to invest in a mutual fund that has ExxonMobil in its portfolio, for example, because I don't want to invest in a fossil fuel company. So there's more and more mutual funds and companies that are directed towards the social responsible investing model, which is something that is growing more quickly than you can imagine. I recently just bought a mutual fund called Drive, and it's got all the companies that are within the mutual fund are somehow involved with electric vehicles. So some are doing battery charging research and production. Some are doing charging stations. Some are working on smart grids. Some are working on the EVs themselves. So this is a very, very big issue for larger companies that are in the venture capital world. We also see, this is again, just the big, broad umbrella, kind of the macro view of the business case, that the ability to bring on really high quality employees and retain them is very enhanced in a company that that carries a green ethos as the basis of their corporate culture. So this was sort of just speculated maybe 20 years ago, but now that we have some long-term research on it, high-performing workplaces, much more of a opportunity in many organizations that embrace green for the employees to have this sort of entrepreneurial attitude or entrepreneurial practices within a corporate culture. So they're allowed to take risks, they're allowed to fail, they're allowed to brainstorm, bounce crazy ideas around. This is very much part and parcel with a sustainability model. And we're seeing through long-term research now, the quality of the employees and the long-term, the loss of or the lack of turnover and the enhanced retention is now been proven. And the fifth facet, risk mitigation. This is kind of a mouthful. So one thing that businesses are always very concerned with is called exposure or risk. So, your business has lots of opportunities, certainly, but your business also has risks. So, and you want to always mitigate or reduce or eliminate, you're never going to eliminate them, but reduce as much as possible your exposure or your risks, because generally those are not good things. So some of the things that are just inherent with climate change and resource constraints and increased, human health risks, as we've seen with the pandemic, is if I set my business up so that my raw material usage is less reliant on non-renewable resources and more reliant on renewable resources or on recycled resources, if I'm removing toxins from my product, if I'm gearing myself up so that I'm procuring my energy from renewable sources rather than non-renewable sources, I am preparing myself for the increasingly obvious evolution towards a climate impaired world. So I'm making myself more resilient and I'm reducing my risk to all of the things that we're seeing, increasingly unpack from climate change and from social chaos and from just all the, from really tough to get your supply chain. We've got something right now, I just read something like 6,000 container ships sitting off the coast of Long Beach that can't offload. Well, they're full of products and sub-assemblies from China that companies in America can't get the raw materials to continue to produce. Well, if you don't have resources, you can't produce your products. That's risk. And so how do I mitigate that? Well, maybe I return to a made in America ethos, for example. And reduce costs of capital. We're just seeing that companies that have sustainability as a part of their corporate model, when they go to the banks or they go to folks that grant loans or give capital, that they're able to get lower rates of interest, and the actual money or the capital is costing them less because they have more solid business models. So this is right here a snapshot of the business case for sustainability. You really need to just be able to sort of reiterate this. I'm going to spend some time now kind of digging into some of these different areas a little bit deeper, but really this is the overview. So the first point was about revenue enhancement and innovation. And when your company maybe converts or starts to transition to this idea of how do I take advantage of disruptive technologies and what's going on with the ever-evolving green revolution. I mean, the fastest growing markets really across the board are in areas that somehow embrace green or sustainability. Alternative transportation models, we all know that, high-speed rail, electric buses, car sharing, Uber, etc. Green IT, how are we creating mass technology capacity without having to cool all these huge data farms, the proverbial cloud. More and more people traveling in recreation tourism, they want to have a volunteer experience, or they want to engage in ecotourism. I mean, it's, obviously our energy, this is a geothermal plant in Reykjavik. This is obviously an electric vehicle charging up. This rise of the so-called conscious consumers, very, 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 very critical when most companies are sitting down to look at their product portfolio and discuss where they're going to be moving with their research and development. This is significant. So conscious consumer, there's lots of research about it. One surrounds this term called LOHAS, Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability. And this is kind of interesting. This refers to, and you and I are probably low-cost consumers in some ways. So you go to the market, and it doesn't matter whether you're buying products for your baby's bath, or you're buying groceries for yourself or your family, or you're buying pet food, or you're making a clothing decision. If the attributes that you're looking at are, well, gosh, I don't want it to be in a disposable container, or I don't want my dog to have pesticides, or cat to have pesticides when she has her meal, or I don't want my baby to have any chemicals in her shampoo or her body wash. That is being a low-cost consumer. You're using the attribute of healthfulness or sustainability to make your purchasing decision. And they say that describes about 70 to 80 million of us in America. This is a breakdown from the Natural Marketing Institute. I'm not going to go through all these, but you can see it goes from low cost, or the most highly concerned, down all the way to completely unconcerned. I don't care if it was, produced by fossil fuels, and it's disposable, and it's fast fashion or fast food. But this breakdown where you see that LOHAS and Naturalites, which are very engaged, very concerned, are now more than a third of consumers and rising. That's significant. And this is just synthesizing a ton of research out there. But the one thing, or the one nice set of trends that we're seeing about LOHAS consumers is that they very much emotionally bond with their products. They have lifetime loyalty. They don't brand jump to save 2% on a like kind product. And there's tons of free PR that's generated by this. So to be honest, this is a marketer's dream. So this is all part of the rise of the conscious consumer. But with that comes, they're data driven. They want information on the product. They want transparency. They want to be able to find information. So if I'm truly a conscious consumer, and I'm looking for, I mostly shop at secondhand stores for my clothes, but I'm really looking for a high grade wool sweater for the winter. I'm not just going to go with a label that's like, oh, hey, I'm green. I'm going to actually look and be like, where's that wool sourced? And who shears the sheep that the wool comes from? Well, if it's in the highlands of Uzbekistan, it's probably child labor. I'm not going to do that. So they're very information driven, and they want transparency. They want easy access to how the company's behaving. And they can unpack greenwashing pretty easily. I'm going to talk about this and then I'll go up, but we're seeing, this was a book that was written, gosh, probably a good 7 or 8 years ago now, but just talking about this increasing understanding of consumers as to how everything we buy has impact, and how much power we have as consumers to drive the market. I can tell you, we wouldn't be talking about, Ford wouldn't be talking about electric vehicle F-150s if there wasn't a shift in consumer demand to push them that way, right? Because it's going to take a tremendous investment on their part. So what we're seeing is more and more of us are saying, you know what, whether I'm a college student living on a couple $100 a month, or I'm a professional that's got a good wage, or I'm a retired person that's on a fixed income, I want my purchasing behavior to reflect my ethics. I want my investing behavior to reflect my ethics and my values and my beliefs. And we're just seeing much more of a confluence of that. Well, so what are my beliefs? And you can see there's this wide range of what sustainable products might look like. So I want you to just take a second, go through this list. And this is where it's funner to be in the classroom together. And tell me if you think that what's important to you is on this list. It's what you call sustainable. Or is there anything you would add? Because this list, and it's actually, I didn't get it all in one slide, but it was composed from students in other classes. What do you call sustainable? And that's what's kind of the moving target for most of us, is when a company says, hey, I'm sustainable. It's like, are you all these things? One of them, two of them? I mean, are you organic, but you, you know, your packaging is disposable plastic? Well, that doesn't work for me. Okay, and then the question, you know, is green consumerism a passing fad? And I'm just going to read this to you because I think it's important. We live in times characterized by change and volatility. Obviously, we've seen that so much the last 2 years. Yet we can be certain of one thing: consumer values, needs, and behaviors will continue to evolve. What does 2020 to 2030 consumer trends look like? So what marketers are doing, what business managers are doing, what sustainability directors are doing, which, by the way, in companies, those are called CSOs, Chief Sustainability Officers. We're seeing a huge rise in them, which means that companies are valuing this right up there with their chief executive officer and their chief financial officer and their chief information officer. So as these executives get together, they're really saying, listen, we need to be able to read these upcoming demographic trends. Is this conscious consumer trend going to continue to evolve, and at what pace? And how do we increasingly design products and processes to meet their needs? Obviously the ever more dramatic impact of technology on our lives. How are we teaching? How are we learning? How are we moving goods and products around? And then how is consumptionistic patterns changing? And certainly there's still a tremendous amount of overconsumptionism, particularly in the developed nations, particularly in America. But we are seeing that more and more folks, even affluent people, are saying, listen, it's just too much. It's just too much. There's the tremendous amount of waste that's generated, the explosion of debt, the climate. We have got to ratchet in this cradle to grave consumptionistic hamster wheel we're on. And I'm going to align my purchasing behavior with that. This is a really big deal too, not just the end product itself, but consumers increasingly interested in responsible supply chain. Supply chain refers to all the raw materials, the labor, everything that went into a final product is referred to as the supply chain. So it's not helpful if the leather purse that I just bought is sold at an ethically, at an ethical organization. They have living wages, they utilize renewable energy for their retail storefront, but the leather itself was tanned using, very toxic mercuries in inland China by children. Okay, so that's, the final product's being presented to me in a green way, but the supply chain is obviously corrupted. That's not a green product. Also important to know, once you have embraced sustainability and put it out there, it's very easy to tarnish. So Volkswagen, right? A couple of years ago, they've always touted how eco-friendly they are. Of course, they're a German company. And then we came to find out that their emission modules were inauthentic or were tampered with, or the research around them was in error, and they were emitting 40 times the allowed nitrogen oxide into the air. So, here was their, the rhinos and Africa and climate change, and they did a lot of branding around that. And I mean, overnight, with their actions did not meet the brand they were trying to portray. And their stock plummeted, their reputation plummeted, their car sales plummeted. Or IKEA, right, out of Sweden, who's long been linked to sustainability. They were some of the first that engaged in low, very, very low or no packaging, low cost, because the consumer could assemble the product themselves. They just had this whole host of, they actually used the natural stuff from week one as a framework for building their company. And they were caught, illegally logging in the Ukraine. So greenwashing exposed. When this happens to companies that have built their brand around sustainability, it can be quite unpleasant, to say the least. And again, I've already talked about this a little bit, but you can just see like all these different markets. The green segment of each of these markets are skyrocketing. Recycled content paper products, something, solar 20 years ago was, basically, hippies or really rich people had it. And now it's very, very mainstream. Natural fibers, a much more of a return to, very fast growing plants for our fiber sources. The huge growth in green building, and now it's even mandated in certain places that buildings are energy efficient, come from recycled products, are cited so that, they take advantage of natural light. And I mean, just so, percolated, stormwater, percolated, driving, what am I trying to say? Parking lots and such. I mean, just it's a very huge and growing field, and then the sustainable furnishings to go in it. So just the growth potential, and this is all still on number one, with innovation, branding, growing markets, conscious consumers, is a pretty compelling selling point for many companies. And then this is just all around climate change, and then I'll wrap this number one up. But, climate change alone, we have a whole unit on that. If a company isn't really looking at the risks and opportunities around that, they are missing the boat, because the risks are significant and the opportunities are equally compelling. So PG&E, the big energy producer in California, the first really major climate bankruptcy we've seen in this country, 31 billion in lawsuits around the wildfires in Northern California and the part that they played in them. This is a company that's working, okay, so let me just back up a little bit. Palm oil is in everything, right? It's in our lotion, it's in our potato chips, it's in our oil for our cars, it's in it's in plastics, it's in this wide plethora of products. Well, palm oil is a big contributor to deforestation. Indonesia, Brazil, taking down forests, putting up palm oil because it goes in all these consumer products. And deforestation is a major contributor to climate change, right? So now we have a company that's looking at how can we grow palm oil that we don't need to put up palm trees to do it. So it would mitigate deforestation. So talk about an opportunity that's driven by climate change. Wow. ExxonMobil, right? Okay, we all know who they are. And fossil fuel company, very concerned with something called stranded assets. In other words, all the fossil fuels that are still under the Earth's crust that we haven't pulled out of the Earth's crust and burned, right? That's called stranded assets. And as more and more countries are regulating and mandating decreased carbon emissions, their shareholders and board and managers are very worried about this risk around stranded assets. Delta Airline just came out 3 weeks ago, talk about an opportunity, first carbon neutral airline, they're telling us. They are actively investing in a carbon-free airline fuel, air fuel and avian fuel. And if they get there first, that's going to be a huge opportunity. So on and on and on, tons of opportunities and risks around climate change. Okay, I think I'm going to end this one here, and then I'm going to do a second one on points 2 through 6. So on this one, we introduced the business case, and we, sorry, let me put this back here. So on this first half, it's better to have the tapes broken into 2. If they get too long, they get tough to caption. So on the first one, we talked about the business case for sustainability, those 6 prongs. And then we really dug into the first one on enhancing brand imaging and competitive advantage and innovation capacity through embracing sustainability. And then on the upcoming one, we'll go through the operating costs, socially responsible investing, reduced cost of capital, enhanced employee retention and recruiting, and risk mitigation. So I will tape that second one, and then you guys can watch that and do both of them together. Okay, thanks. I've enjoyed having this time together. Bye.